Okay, hi. Thanks for coming along. My name's Katrina Clokie. I have kind of an unusual career journey, not unique, but unusual. And one of the reasons I wrote this talk is that I wanted to encourage more people to follow a path like this. So the talk is called Tester to CTO, and I feel like I should start by qualifying that a little bit. I did have testing roles in my career history. I have also been a CTO. The bigger picture, though, is a little bit more complex. So I did a Bachelor of Computing and Mathematical Science, a 4-year degree majoring in software engineering. And when I finished that degree, I went into development because I didn't know that there were other jobs. Like, I thought you got a computer science degree and you became a developer. I got my second job as a delivery engineer because I wanted to travel. A colleague of mine moved to a company that were serving Central and Latin America and Asia Pacific to do mobile network installs, not the radio network, but the IN. And that was a really fun job. I was racking and cabling, installing, configuring and testing mobile phone networks. And when I left that job, the part of it that I enjoyed the most was the testing. And I decided that I wanted to have a job specialised in test. I think it's a little unusual for people to go from development to testing. I really enjoy testing. I think it's more fun to try and pick something apart than to create it. And testing was the place where I found like lots of opportunity to learn and grow and think about things. It was also the place where I started to become more senior. So you can see from tester, the titles start to shift a little. I went through leadership and coaching roles into test practice management. Then there was a flip. So from my test practice manager role, I went into a general engineering manager position. A lot of the people I talk to in quality assume that you have to go down to go back up again. So they might be a test manager or a test director, and they're like, oh, I need to go back to being like a lead engineer or something so that I can keep going up. That wasn't my experience, and I don't think it has to be that way. There were a lot of transferable skills for me to shift from that test practice space into engineering, and then from there through senior engineering roles into CTO. Since I delivered this talk for the first time, I then got promoted and was a CTPO. And I since left that role in February, and now I'm working independently as a coach and trainer for engineering leaders. So, tester to CTO, but like with some nuance. I also, when I pitched this talk, I told my husband the title, and he said, you can't go and tell people that you are just a tester. Just for the record, nobody is just a tester. But again, caveat, so I wrote a book in 2017 about testing. I used to run workshops and conferences in New Zealand called We Test from 2013 through 2017. These were quite big events. We had like 500 people in 2 cities. We had international speakers come out. I used to blog. I used to run a testing magazine. Like, testing was a community that I was very visible in through this time. And I think that all of these experiences gave me more credibility as a candidate to go into engineering leadership and a CTO role. So I wanted to talk a little bit about why. Why did I want to do this? And Vernon actually set me up like great. I went to his talk earlier. And he talked about the authority gap between a tester saying something and a CTO saying the same thing, and how that message is received differently. That was a big motivation for me. I want to be the person that is actually listened to. But what I found in my career, like I bounced around a bit at the beginning, but then you often end up on a career path. And lots of organizations have these defined, where you're an individual contributor and then you're going to get promoted to like a senior individual contributor, and then you can go to like a lead role, and then you might be able to get to like a manager role and kind of the same trajectory. Like it could be dev manager or quality manager or support team manager. But then you kind of reach a point where it feels like the end of the path that is known. People will stop trying to help you forward. Like what I really liked about this photo is there's a guy at the front who's like, come on, take another step. You sort of reach a point where your own manager is so senior, they are sort of too busy to focus on you as much. And for me, I started to end up bouncing at the same level in an organization. Like they kept restructuring and I was just going like this along different teams and tracks. And I was getting bored because I'm standing at the end of this path on a little stone and I know what I'm doing and I don't know where I should go next. There's kind of a point in leadership where you have to jump into something completely unknown and different. Like the frameworks, the career frameworks stop being relevant or adhered to. The people who go past kind of the end of a career framework are the ones who are brave and who are backing themselves and who are going to make a bit of a leap into the unknown. I would argue that no one applying for a leadership role at senior leadership levels really knows what they're getting into. A lot of the time there's a disconnect between the job that's advertised and the job that actually exists. And it feels like this. For me, from kind of my GM level through to C level, every new role felt like this. I really enjoy this feeling of like, oh, I'm drowning. This is fun. In retrospect, though, I realized maybe it wasn't quite as much like this as I thought. And that's what I want to talk about. So this is a picture of a building just down the road from us. It's the Turning Torso. It was the tallest building in Sweden from 2005 to 2022, apparently. So career progression, if you think about, or if I think about my role when I was a tester as being like the turning torso, I'm building up all of these different skills in software testing. I'm getting known in the industry. I'm writing a book. Like I have a real depth of knowledge in this field. My identity is fairly closely aligned with software testing. When I leapt into engineering leadership and senior leadership, it felt like, whoa, I don't know anything again. But actually, now that I look at what I know, it's not like your testing experience or knowledge disappears. It just becomes one thing in a wider landscape of skills. And the things that you learned with that deep experience become applicable in like this wider landscape view of what your career and role has become. So I kind of think of this like the more senior you get, you're zooming out from what was your core experience, but that's always going to be part of who you are and how you lead. So I have 3 thoughts in here of different skills that I believe software testers have real strength and depth in, and how I would reframe those in a senior leadership role as things that I still would use daily as an exec. And the core skills came from my time as a tester. So the first is feedback. Testers get a lot of experience delivering feedback. This is Cartoon Tester. He used to create a lot of cartoons. When I went looking for this, I realized he hasn't for a while, so this might date me. But when you're a tester, a core part of your job is telling people that there's a problem with the software. And you want to do that in a way that means that you're preserving the working relationships in your team, that people are listening to the feedback that you're giving, and that they're still going to listen tomorrow when you have to tell them again that something has gone wrong. Like, you get a lot of practice structuring feedback in a way that it's going to be received, maintaining relationships despite this. It's a skill that I would argue testers get more practice at than other roles. You're also likely to need to build skills in persuasion. So not only are you learning how to structure and deliver feedback effectively, but you're also trying to influence what you want a team to do. So this is a tool that I used to use and still do for persuading people. The first part of this is very similar to SBI, which is like a common framework for giving feedback, situation, behavior, implication. Spin is a little different in that you're also trying to advocate for a solution or a need, something that you want people to do. I first came across this as a tester because I was getting really annoyed that no one would listen to me in retrospectives. I was outnumbered. We would have our delivery team retro. There'd be 5 devs, me, a BA, and a Scrum Master. And I'd be like, we need to do this thing. And everyone would be like, okay, let's dot vote on what we're going to do. And I'm like, clearly, I needed a better way, and this was the way. I needed to structure my arguments, talking about what I saw, why I cared about it, but also being able to explain to people why I thought they should care, and then articulating what I wanted us to do. As a tester, not only are you getting skilled at delivering feedback and persuading people, you're also looking for indicators or like seeking out feedback from the system that you're working in. So this is trying to figure out, okay, have I done enough? Like, what feedback am I getting from the system around me that tells me whether my testing has gone too far or not far enough? So like, if I am raising a ton of bugs and not many are getting fixed, I probably spent time that was wasted. Like, my risk appetite is lower than the appetite of the org. If there are no bugs in production, perhaps controversially, I think you tested too deep. Like, you slowed the process down so much that there was zero risk. So this is a concept for how do you find feedback in the system around you that tells you if you're doing the right thing. So as a tester, you're delivering feedback constantly. You're trying to advocate for things, and you're also looking at the system in which you're operating to understand whether you're doing the right things or not. All of those skills are core skills for an exec role. I would reframe them as stakeholder management. So in an executive meeting, I need to be prepared to disagree. And disagreeing with developers for several years was extremely good practice for disagreeing with my CEO. You need to know how to present your opinion in a persuasive way. So the same way that I was advocating in a retro for something I wanted to do, I was using those same tools to advocate in our exec meetings about stuff I wanted to happen within product and technology. Listening and being approachable and inviting direct feedback, all skills that came from my testing background. The looking for signals where direct feedback is absent. I think this is really important at the exec level, and that testing pendulum was kind of core baseline for that. When you're a C-level exec, people aren't always going to tell you what's wrong. They'll usually tell you when something's good, but when something's bad, like, it can be scary to go and tell someone at the exec, like, this is what's happening. And so the models that I had built for understanding the system around me and whether or not I was doing the right things or not as a tester became really useful and applicable as an exec when sometimes the direct feedback is not there. You have to look at the environment and understand the impacts you're having in different ways. And then lots of practice navigating conflict as a tester, which again was really vital for me once I hit that exec level role. Developers do all of these things too, right? I'm not saying they don't. But I do think that testers actually have a stronger skill set here because they get to practice these things more often, and direct feedback about their work isn't always as present as for a dev who can write some code and like, does this compile? Does this deploy? You know, there's often more checks. Okay, transparency. As a tester, what you do isn't always that visible. And I certainly hit this early in my career where people would say, what did you just spend all your time doing? And so there were a variety of things I used to use to show people. I liked to make visual test diagrams and be like, here's all the things I've thought about, and these are the different tests that I've been running. State transition diagrams, like here's the workflow that I'm testing, and here's how I'm thinking about interrogating this workflow, and like, is this the workflow? Are there other things in here? Visually representing different ways of interrogating thresholds or date ranges and making sure people understand, like, here's what I'm going to test, and here's what I'm not going to test, and here's how I'm thinking about that. Looking at dashboards that show status across different features or different teams where you can see the priority of work and how far through we are, where the bugs exist, what commentary you have. So all of these are ways of making the work that you're doing transparent and visible to others. Again, developers can show you working software. BAs and product people can show you like requirements or user stories. In testing, I think, yes, the automation suite is part of it, but there's a broader set of things that you have to work a little bit harder to make visible. Talking of automation. So test automation, I also found it difficult to make visible beyond the build result. So like, do the test pass or fail in the pipeline? And this was one of the strategies I used to use to engage the wider team in talking about our test automation and why it existed, what it was dependent on and constrained by, helping them understand what it actually covered, and what we needed to do to keep it valuable and maintained. All of these things, again, became the core foundation for, at an executive level, having strong accountability. I was really accustomed to creating simple visuals for really complex things, which was very useful at the C-level when you're trying to socialize information to your department. I was a proponent of having information shared freely and widely. This was a little spicy in our executive context. You have to learn where the line is on what you can and can't share from exec, but my default was always share more and give people the information they need to do their jobs well. Show your results and outcomes. So when I was a tester, I actually used to feel a lot of frustration about what the leadership team were doing, especially when I was working so hard to make my own work visible. And so once I was in that exec space, I was mindful of making other people aware of where I was focused and what impact I was having on the wider company, which is closely tied into being accountable for where your time is going. And part of this is also allowing people to then question you and you being able to explain back to them why you're doing what you are. If you're not sharing information, it's hard for people to ask you questions about what you're up to. If you're not showing results and outcomes, people are going to get grumpy about like, why are you here? Why are you spending time there? What are you doing? So again, I think the skills I learned in testing directly transferable into the accountability you need at the C-level to be running a team that get the information they need to be accountable and autonomous and feel happy in what they're doing. And then thirdly, I wanted to talk about planning. So as a tester, you need to figure out what to test. These things are all from the era when I was a tester. I know the cheat sheet still exists, but it's now hosted by a Ministry of Testing. Originally, Elizabeth Hendrickson had a website and that had an amazing tool on it. Karen Johnson had some heuristics for this. Michael Hunter had Yandy. So there was a bunch of things you could use to check, like, have I thought about all the things here that I could do to interrogate this system? And then you're planning out, like, which one's first. Similarly, how do you then decide which of those things to automate? So you're thinking through, okay, what's the strategy for this product? Is it something we want to get out fast and loose to test the market? Is this a legacy thing? What are the risks associated with this? Are there things I'm going to have to do over and over again that would be just useful to script up? What's the opportunity cost of me automating this thing versus spending more time testing? Do I know there's going to be some org change coming and that's going to shift, like the institutional knowledge of this thing would be useful to automate that because I know it's going to end up in a place where that won't be present. So you're thinking through, which of these things mean that I should automate? And then more broadly, like your test strategy as a whole, this is an example of a retro. Top left is we've had an idea, top right is it's in production, and then what are all the testing activities that we want to do between those 2 points? And this was an exercise I used to run with the delivery teams that I was part of, just to make sure we were all on the same page about what we were and weren't doing and who was going to do those things. And this is all planning out, what does our process look like, who's going to participate in it, and how we're going to manage getting something great to our customers. All of these skills from testing become the core of how I think strategically at the exec. So when you're asked to define technology strategy for a company, the first step you're going to take is pretty similar. You're looking to understand wisdom from industry. You want to step back and assess what's going to be required in your company at a high level, and then collaborate with people and validate your thinking, document and share it, and then iterate, basically. So those same skills for looking up test heuristics or collaborating with a delivery team to define test strategy, they're transferable skills that you're going to need in an exec level role when you're defining strategy and planning on a higher level. So the path from tester to CTO, caveat, I do have background in development as well. I was very fortunate to have the opportunity to shift from test practice management into engineering management, which really gave me foundation to then grow into these senior level roles. But the skills from testing don't disappear, and I think are really core to why I've been effective at the senior leadership level. So I've talked about feedback becoming the foundation of stakeholder management, transparency becoming accountability as an exec, and planning becoming how I think strategically as a leader. So what I want to encourage you to think about is, if you're on a path right now and you feel like you're on the final stepping stone, especially these people, if you've run out of steps to take and the people around you have stopped kind of pulling you forward, maybe it's time to leap somewhere different. And the way to be successful at this is to reframe the skills that you have today and understand how they could help you succeed in the next place that you want to go. Because even though it feels like a leap, a lot of this stuff you already are great at is going to be the things that will help you be successful in the next opportunity that's coming. I powered through that so quickly. Thank you for listening. Appreciate it. I have 10 minutes if you want to do questions, but I also heard clapping from next door, and I know they need to take this wall down. So maybe I'll just hang out here by the stage if anyone wants to come chat. Otherwise, thanks for coming. Cool.